party house by two students, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis. As they helped her walk cost critical hours in a potential rescue. By the time authorities realized something was seriously wrong, it was already too late. Paul Flores quickly became a person of interest, but with no body, no weapon, and few answers, the case stalled. Kristin's parents, Denise and Stan Smart, began their own heartbreaking search, putting up posters, calling media, and pleading for answers that never came. This wasn't just a missing persons case. It was the beginning of a 25-year nightmare. May 25, 1996. The night everything changed. It was Memorial Day weekend. Kristin Smart left her dorm at Cal Poly around 8 p.m., planning to attend an off-campus party. She didn't carry a purse, ID, or money. Signs she expected to return shortly. Around 2 a.m., after the party had died down, Kristin was found lying unconscious on a lawn near the house. Two students, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis, saw her, clearly intoxicated and disoriented. As they helped her walk back to campus, a third student joined them, 19-year-old Paul Flores. Cheryl later said she was uncomfortable around Paul. One by one, Tim and Cheryl departed, leaving Kristin alone with Paul. According to his own statement, he walked her as far as her dorm and then went home. But Kristin never made it to her room. She didn't attend church the next day with friends, didn't call her family, and didn't show up to class. May 28, 1996. Delayed response. Shockingly, it took the university police 3 days to file a missing person report. Initially, officers assumed Kristin had gone away for the long weekend, a critical error that allowed key evidence to degrade or disappear. By the time the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office took over the case, crucial hours had been lost. Early June 1996. Paul Flores emerges as a key suspect. Paul Flores quickly stood out. He had a black eye the morning after Kristin disappeared, which he awkwardly explained away. First saying he got it playing basketball, then claiming he hit his head on a car's steering wheel. His story shifted under pressure. Multiple people reported that Paul had a reputation on campus for making women uncomfortable. Authorities searched Paul's dorm room, finding inconsistencies and items of interest, but no conclusive evidence. They also conducted a ground search using cadaver dogs. All 4 dogs independently alerted to Paul's dorm bed, a chilling sign. 1996 to 2002. Case grows cold. Despite mounting suspicions, no charges were filed. Kristin's body had not been found, and there was no physical evidence strong enough for an arrest. In 2002, Kristin Smart was declared legally dead. For her family, it was devastating. A final, formal acknowledgement that their daughter would likely never return home. 2002 to 2016. Silence and dead ends. 4 years, the case went quiet. Leads dried up. Paul Flores moved to Southern California and lived with his parents. Kristin's family kept her memory alive through billboards, interviews, and a $75,000 reward. But justice felt far away. 2019. A podcast rekindles the case. Enter Your Own Backyard, a podcast by Chris Lambert, a local musician turned investigator. The series reignited interest in Kristin's case nationwide. Lambert tracked down forgotten witnesses, uncovered inconsistencies in Paul's statements, and revealed potential mishandling in the original investigation. Most importantly, the podcast prompted new witnesses to come forward, including women who accused Paul Flores of sexual assault in later years. Suddenly, the narrative changed. Kristin's disappearance was no longer just a mystery. It looked like part of a pattern. 2020. Renewed law enforcement activity. Motivated by public pressure and fresh witness accounts, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office reopened its investigation. In early 2020, They served multiple search warrants at the homes of Paul Flores and his family members. In March 2021, detectives announced they had found items of interest, and excavation began under the deck of Paul's father, Ruben Flores. April 13, 2021. Arrests made. After 25 years, Paul Flores was arrested and charged with the murder of Kristin Smart. Ruben Flores was also arrested, accused of helping his son hide Kristin's body. District Attorney Dan Dow stated that Kristin was killed during an attempted rape in Paul's dorm room. Though her body was still missing, investigators believed they had enough circumstantial and forensic evidence to move forward. October 2022. Paul Flores convicted. Following a months-long trial, Paul Flores was found guilty of Kristin Smart's murder. The jury heard from over 40 witnesses, including women who claimed Paul had sexually assaulted them in the past, painting a picture of predatory behavior spanning decades. Ruben Flores, however, was found not guilty of being an accessory. March 10, 2023. Sentencing. Paul Flores was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Kristin's family finally had a measure of justice, though her remains have still never been recovered. The investigation into Kristin Smart's disappearance was, from the beginning, a tragic mix of urgency, heartbreak, and devastating missteps. When Kristin vanished after the party on May 25, 1996, the Cal Poly campus police waited 3 full days before filing an official missing persons report. They assumed she had taken off for the long weekend. But Kristin never returned, and her parents quickly knew something was horribly wrong. Those 72 lost hours would haunt the case for decades. Once the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office took over, attention quickly focused on Paul Flores, the last person seen with Kristin. Paul claimed he walked Kristin back to her dorm and then went to his own. But there were red flags everywhere. Paul had a black eye the very next morning. When questioned, he gave shifting explanations, first blaming a basketball injury, then saying he bumped his head. Friends and acquaintances told police that Paul had a disturbing reputation on campus. Several women described him as creepy, and one said she avoided him because of inappropriate comments and behavior. Police searched Paul's dorm room, but found it had already been cleaned for summer break. Still, cadaver dogs brought in by investigators made a chilling discovery. All 4 independently alerted to Paul's mattress, signaling the possible scent of human decomposition. But without a body, and with no physical evidence directly linking Paul to Kristin's disappearance, the case stalled. Further complicating things, the Smart family believed local authorities didn't do enough. Crucial phone records, security footage, and witness interviews were either missed or delayed. Over time, leads dried up. Kristin's face faded from news headlines, and her case went cold. But her family never gave up. In 2019, a civilian podcast called Your Own Backyard reignited public attention. Journalist Chris Lambert began investigating independently and uncovered new witnesses, including several women who accused Paul Flores of sexually assaulting them in later years. These weren't isolated claims. They painted a consistent, disturbing pattern of predatory behavior. These new voices gave law enforcement renewed momentum. In 2020, the sheriff's office served a series of search warrants on Paul's home, his parents' homes, and even vehicles. Digital forensics teams recovered decades-old phone data, images, and files. The breakthrough came during an excavation at Ruben Flores's backyard, Paul's father. Ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis suggested the earth beneath Ruben's deck had been disturbed. Cadaver dogs once again alerted. Investigators claimed to find biological evidence, believed to be human blood, though degraded and not viable for full DNA profiling. The sheriff later stated they had strong evidence a body had been buried there, and later moved. Though no complete body was recovered, circumstantial and forensic evidence, including statements from women alleging past assaults, cadaver dog alerts, phone records, and Paul's inconsistent stories, built a compelling narrative. The prosecution would later argue that Paul Flores attempted to sexually assault Kristin Smart in his dorm room that night, and killed her in the process. His father, Reuben, allegedly helped conceal the body. The lack of DNA or direct physical evidence did not stop the case, because the pattern of behavior, timeline, and newly surfaced witness accounts were powerful enough to convince a jury. Kristin's parents had waited 25 years for accountability. While her remains are still unrecovered, the evidence, though mostly circumstantial, finally carried the weight of truth. Studio microphone. Optional closing note. After 25 years of unanswered questions, heartbreak, and dead ends, April 13, 2021, marked a historic turning point. Paul Flores was arrested and charged with the murder of Kristin Smart. His father, Reuben Flores, was also taken into custody, accused of helping conceal Kristin's body. For Kristin's family, it was a moment both devastating and hopeful. Confirmation that their daughter had been murdered, but also that someone would finally be held accountable. San Luis Obispo County District Attorney Dan Dow laid out the case. Paul Flores, then 19, attempted to sexually assault Kristin Smart in his dorm room on the night of May 25, 1996. When she resisted, he murdered her, and then, with the help of his father, buried her body to cover up the crime. Though Kristin's remains had never been recovered, prosecutors relied on a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Cadaver dog alerts, phone and computer records, forensic findings in Reuben's backyard, and decades of alleged behavior by Paul Flores that showed a pattern of violence toward women. The trial began in July 2022 and was held in Monterey County, after a judge ruled that Paul Flores couldn't receive a fair trial in San Luis Obispo due to intense local media attention. In court, the prosecution painted Paul as a serial predator. Several women came forward to testify that Flores had drugged and raped them in the early 2000s. Though not directly related to Kristin's case, the judge allowed these testimonies to establish a pattern of predatory behavior, showing that what happened to Kristin was not isolated. One woman told the jury, "He smiled as if this was normal." The courtroom was tense. Kristin's parents sat quietly, holding hands, as each horrific detail was laid bare, not only of what might have happened to their daughter, but what Paul Flores allegedly continued to do, unchecked, for years. The defense argued that the case was built on speculation and old memories. They reminded the jury that no body had ever been found, and much of the physical evidence was either missing or inconclusive. Paul's attorney described the prosecution's case as emotionally charged but legally weak. But the jury didn't agree. On October 18, 2022, after weeks of emotional testimony and complex arguments, Paul Flores was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Kristin Smart. His father, Reuben Flores, was acquitted, a painful blow for prosecutors, but a small piece of closure nonetheless. Kristin's mother, Denise Smart, wept silently in the courtroom. Outside, she told reporters, "Without Kristin's body, this is the closest thing to justice we may ever get. But we're grateful. And we're not done hoping." On March 10, 2023, Paul Flores was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. He showed little emotion as the sentence was read. Though justice had been delayed, it was no longer denied. As of today, Paul Flores sits behind bars, serving a sentence of 25 years to life for the murder of Kristin Smart. Though her body has still never been found, the long-delayed trial brought some measure of justice, not just for Kristin's grieving family, but for a public that watched this case evolve for over 2 decades. Kristin's parents, Denise and Stan Smart, continue to live with the weight of not knowing where their daughter rests. In interviews, they've described the conviction as a step toward healing, but not closure. "We still need to bring her home," Denise said. "A parent should never have to wonder where their child's final resting place is." Over the years, the public's involvement became part of the story. From billboards and candlelight vigils to social media campaigns and investigative podcasts, people across the country rallied behind Kristin. The podcast Your Own Backyard in particular reignited the case and brought it back to national consciousness. It reminded everyone that even cold cases can burn bright again, if someone is willing to speak up, dig deeper, and refuse to forget. The legal battle may be over, but Kristin's legacy lives on. In her honor, the Kristin Smart Campus Safety Act was passed in California, requiring university police to coordinate with local law enforcement on serious crimes. A step meant to ensure that no other student's disappearance is ever delayed in red tape again. But perhaps the most powerful legacy Kristin leaves behind is the reminder that one life, even one cut short, can echo across generations. She was not just a case file. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend. And her story became a symbol of heartbreak, of persistence, and of justice that refuses to die. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with flashing lights or breaking news. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the voice of a mother who never stopped asking, and in the silence of a courtroom finally filled with truth. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Because remembering her, and others like her, is how we make sure their stories are never buried again.